Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
If you think keeping your bones strong is just about calcium and vitamin D, well, you're in for a big surprise. My guest today, Dr. Jocelyn Wittstein, is here to set the record straight on what really keeps our bones and joints strong after 50. Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara, and this is Age Better. We've talked about bone health before, lots of times before, but this conversation is different. I'm joined by Dr. Jocelyn Wittstein, an orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine doctor at Duke University in Raleigh, North Carolina. You may already know her from Instagram, where she shares quick, practical tips about how to keep bones, joints, and muscles strong. That's how I first discovered her. She's really entertaining. I started following her posts and immediately thought, okay, I have to get her on this show. She's also the co-author of The Musculoskeletal Syndrome of Menopause with Dr. Von der Wright, a very important study. And most recently, she's come out with a really terrific book called The Complete Bone and Joint Health Plan, which just came out a few months ago. In our conversation, Dr. Wittstein explains why bone loss starts earlier than most of us realize, what we should really be focusing on beyond calcium and vitamin D, and how nutrition, movement, and even gut health all work together to protect our bones. She also shares her best equipment-free exercises, talks about the mistakes people make when they think they're being safe with their joints, and gives her perspective as both a surgeon and a mom of 5 athletes on how to make bone health part of daily life. This episode is packed with insights you probably haven't heard before, and I think it will change the way you think about your bones, your joints, and your overall health. Okay, everyone, get ready to age better. Dr. Wittstein, welcome to Age Better.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations on your new book that just came out a few months ago, The Complete Bone and Joint Health Plan. I love this book because it's right to the point. I love it, love it, love it. You have some great recipes in here too, which we'll get to. We'll talk about some of those in a little bit. So congratulations on that. And what made you decide to write this book now?
Well, to be honest, I thought about it for many years, probably much of my career. I've been an orthopedic surgeon in practice for 16 years, and I studied nutritional science as an undergraduate. And I've always been very passionate about exercise as being, part of a healthy lifestyle for multiple reasons. But the things that my patients ask me most commonly, even after I explain in a very hopefully understandable way, like what we're doing for them, if they need a rotator cuff repair or an ACL reconstruction or whatever, I cannot tell you how often someone will end the visit, because I always end visits with, do you have any more questions? And people would ask me, what exercises should I do? What should I eat?
Right.
What supplements should I take? And these are just things that people ask over and over and over again. And I would love to be able to spend an hour giving someone that information, but I just spent 30, counseling.
Yeah, no, exactly. So you put it all in here, everyone. Great idea. And may I add too, all of these questions that your patients have and that other people have that you want to answer, because you care about these people. You care about us. Yeah. And you also have a great presence on Instagram, and that's how I found you. And you're answering these questions in a very kind of accessible way. So, yay. Thank you very much for all of that.
I try to translate things from more complex to more digestible, no pun intended.
Yep.
But Instagram is kind of funny, a little new to me. I started that in January. I'm not typically a big social media person, but thanks to my 19-year-old daughter who showed me how to use Instagram, we launched that together, and it's been fun. I've gotten a lot of really grateful feedback from people. And actually, by people asking me questions, I sometimes learn what people need to have explained to them. So I have actually learned a lot from the interactions with people through Instagram, actually.
Yeah. In fact, quite a few of your Instagram posts, because I follow you pretty religiously now, are based on questions that you've gotten from people,
Yeah.
either patients or people on Instagram.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's exploding. I mean, you just started in January and it's really big now. You've got quite the following. So that's really wonderful. So congratulations on that too. Let's talk about something that's really important. I think a lot of people just don't understand this, just don't know this. I think a lot of the people who are listening right now might, because I've talked about it so much over the years. It's something called the peak bone mass, meaning that's like that time when our bones are at their strongest and at their best. And then we're about 28 to 30 years old. And then with each passing year, we lose bone, we lose muscle, unless you're doing something about it, right? Which we'll get to. And of course, that all accelerates for women as we go through menopause. So let's talk about that. I mean, most people don't think about their bones when they're younger.
Correct.
But we should. Why is that?
Well, as you mentioned, you accrue bone density really prior to the age of 30. And so, what is contributing to that peak bone mass? A lot of it is your life habits that you maybe don't even know you need to be forming. Like, so how active are you? What are you eating? I love some of the data that comes from gymnasts because it really illustrates the effect of load bearing on joints. There aren't very many sports where you weight bear on your arms, but there is a lot of data on gymnasts who have really great upper extremity bone density. And that extends into adulthood. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So it's just kind of a fun case because you literally walk on your hands in that sport. So one of my friends, Tammy Scarpella, has studied that for years and has really long-term follow-up on some of these gymnasts who, just because they're doing upper extremity load bearing, it developed this enhanced bone density, which then extends into adulthood because the peak bone density that they achieved was higher. Now, if you translate that into your lower extremities or your spine or whatever, obviously most sports don't weight bear and walk on their hands. But if you're in high school or college and you're participating in sports with adequate energy, as long as you're not energy deficient, and you're load bearing and doing strength training, you're increasing that peak bone mass that you accumulate. On the other hand, there are things that could take away from that. If you have a poor diet, if you're chronically energy deficient, which we now call, relative energy deficiency syndrome, you could be not optimizing your bone mass that you arrive at that time point. So it's just certainly when we're young and healthy, we're not thinking that what we're doing in that time frame is actually kind of giving us that like level to start from.
Right. And I think that if there are any mothers or grandmothers or other people, parental people who are overseeing the health and wellness of younger people, really think about that. Really think about that and encourage them to take all of these lifestyle steps to build up that bone. But Dr. Wittstein, why is it so important though? Like when we hit 50 and you're going through menopause, why is it so important that you had stronger bones back when you were 30? And the peak bone mass was really good.
We kind of peak at age 30, and then there's this gradual decline in, we could say bone mass or bone density, whichever term you want, that stays fairly similar for men and women until we get to menopause for women. And then we have lack of estrogen or estradiol specifically, which has a very important interaction with our bones. Basically, estradiol, to kind of sum it up, sort of shortens the lifespan of the cells called osteoclast, which break down bone. And in the absence of estradiol, those cells live longer and break down more bone. And so you get if you're thinking of a balance of bone building versus bone breaking down, you get more breaking down in favor of overbuilding. And then you start to have an accelerated loss of bone density. So that can accelerate to something like 2% around the time of menopause.
Right.
So then if you kind of arrived at that age with maybe not optimized bone mass from your youth potentially, then it's declining. This can be a double whammy. And I want to be careful when I say this, because every time I say this, people will get upset and be like, oh no, there's nothing I can do now. I didn't know this. Maybe you're a woman who wasn't involved in sports growing up. Maybe that wasn't even a thing in your school at that time, right?
That was me.
Yeah.
It was definitely in the schools, for sure.
Yeah.
But I just didn't do it. I did not partake.
Yeah. And so
not until I hit 50.
I always want to be careful when I say, like, it's not like there's nothing you can do if you didn't do all these things to optimize your bone mass by age 30. If you know that and you're younger than age 30, it's a good thing to keep in mind. Or if you're raising children, a good thing to keep in mind. But for people who hear this, I always want to be careful that people don't feel defeated when they hear that and say, well, I didn't know that. And here I am. Now I'm a menopausal woman and I'm losing all this bone density. It's very easy for people to hear this information and feel like it's...
Put the blanket over their head. You don't have to worry about that with this audience because they've been hearing that it's never too late, everyone, for years since my first book came out in 2010. So years have gone by with like, it's not too late, get going.
Right.
And they hear my story, I turned 50 and was like, what? Wait a minute, what? I'm 50 and I haven't been doing anything. I did a little bit Jane Fonda back in the day, but you know what I mean? Nothing really serious enough. And then I went through menopause and that's when I started running. And everyone knows that story already, so I'm not going to go into it, but it is never too late. But it's better if you start earlier and you build up that bone density. I think that's the message here, but the really overriding message is it's never too late.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in talking about how to kind of keep your bones strong or make them stronger or, try not to lose more bone density, which is my own personal goal at this stage, because I do have osteopenia, is that you take in your book and in your practice, you do take a holistic approach, which I really, really love, meaning you talk about nutrition. You talk about moving and the proper ways of moving, and not just strength training and resistance training, but also balance and mobility and all of these kind of different facets of moving. And that's very holistic. And you kind of go beyond just the take more calcium and make sure you're getting that vitamin D every day. That's important too, but you go beyond that, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
So obviously there are multiple nutrients and micronutrients that we need for bone health. And the most obvious exercise interventions you can do to stabilize your bone density or even gain some bone density are some jumping or impact exercises and strength training, which I want to get to this later. There's a lot of talk about you have to lift really, really heavy. And
we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. But, actually, strength training of all types does help some. It's just we have to figure out what we as individuals can do. But so impact exercise and strength training are the most obvious ways to stabilize or maybe even improve your bone density. But the other parts you don't want to neglect are, like balance for fall prevention. We need to work on maintaining our balance as we age. And just movement, like a little agility, like making sure you kind of practice a little bit with moving your feet and, responding to your external environment. One of the additional benefits of doing balance work, whether it's yoga or single leg stance or whatever, is like when you stand in a single leg stance and you're balancing, you're actually having to engage your foot muscles. Like if you ever looked at a gymnast on a beam and you see them gripping their toes, those are kind of small little muscles that we don't think about using that you need to use and activate so that you maintain your balance and don't fall over if you need to, stand on one leg.
We don't want to fall. I mean, that is a huge goal. I think of most people as they get older is like, okay, I don't want to fall. I mean, even if you have, think about this, even if you have low bone density like I do, and I'm doing everything I can right now to keep my bone density where it is. I mean, that's really my goal. If I can build some bone, great, but that's my goal. But the big goal is don't fall. Because even though my bones are not what they were when I was 20, if I don't fall, it'll be okay.
Right.
So that's really a big goal.
And I like how you keep mentioning your goal is to not lose more bone density, because I think a lot of people kind of maybe hear about or see certain interventions and they think if an intervention isn't helping them gain bone density, it's not worth doing. And
by the way, sorry to interrupt you, but you did a great Instagram post about that exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I applaud you for that, where you like, a lot of you are just like feeling a little defeated that you
Right.
or maybe aren't gaining bone. And that's hard to do unless you're on a hardcore medication. And there's some great medications out there, of course, as we know.
And
right?
we can gain some with certain interventions that are non-medication, but some of those gains, the numbers sound really small. Like how 1% improvement sounds really small. But actually, I like to say if you're not losing, you're gaining. Because if you think about if the natural history, if you're a menopausal woman who is, or for whatever reason, maybe can't, use estradiol, if you're expected to kind of lose 2% per year, but some intervention is keeping you where you are not losing, or maybe losing less than that, that's actually helping.
Yes.
And it's hard for people to think about that even a small loss, if it's less than the loss that you would otherwise expect, is actually an improvement.
It is a gain. I couldn't agree more. And every year when I get my DEXA, my doctor and I review, and it's more or less stayed the same.
Which is
slight
great.
loss, of course. We're talking 18 years now. I'm 68. And that's a great gain. I'm very proud of this. And the good news that there are a couple of new things that have come out, which we'll talk about one of them in a little bit, that just might help to make that goal easier to achieve. So you do address, you go beyond the calcium and the vitamin D. You also, in your book, you also focus on the micronutrients that many of us may not be aware of that are really important for bones. Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah. We always think like, what nutrients do you need for your bones? Of course, everyone thinks about calcium and vitamin D.
Yeah.
I like to kind of explain it like this. There are other nutrients that, of course, help calcium get to our bones. So vitamin D helps us with absorbing it, but magnesium helps vitamin D help us absorb calcium. And magnesium has other roles, like regulates parathyroid hormone and can be part of the actual crystalline structure of bone. But so magnesium is one. Vitamin K, you all will often see if you're taking a vitamin D supplement, you will see it often is accompanied by vitamin K. And vitamin K is kind of on the other side of things. So you get that calcium in, and then the vitamin K helps direct the calcium to your bones by activating something called osteocalcin. So those are kind of a couple of big ones. Vitamin C is important for helping collagen form, the actual collagen that is in your bone. So that's another pretty common nutrient, luckily, in a lot of fruits and vegetables. And I think, I have a whole table in the book. And
it's a wonderful table. You do go into a great detail.
All the micronutrients, And I want to add, I studied nutritional science as an undergraduate, but you can see my co-author is a registered dietitian.
Yes.
I think it's very important to have, her input in this book. Her name is Sydney Nitsgorski. And as a fun fact, we grew up together. We were collegiate gymnasts. We competed against each other after being lifelong friends. She went to Brown.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah, she went to Brown and I went to Cornell. So we were teammates growing up and then on opposite teams in college. And then she studied nutrition at Columbia. And so she's an amazing resource. And so when you're reading this book, if you think about it, you'll see there is I have a nutritional science background, but I'm also an orthopedic surgeon. And then we have her input, and she's also a personal trainer. And so it's just kind of like all of our brains just sort of melded together into what's in here.
And it shows too. And I also love that, there were some great recipes and the food information you just said, but also some great,
modeling.
The modeling, exactly. You actually doing some of these great exercises that you want us all to be doing. That's good. So you're doing it too. Good. Yeah, that's really
to be
good.
Our own models. Yeah.
So what do you think? Based on hearing from your patients over the years, and now since January, hearing from people on Instagram, right, reaching out and asking questions. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you encounter about bone health? I think you mentioned one of them already, and that is like, oh, why aren't I improving or increasing my bone density by 10%?
Right.
Because I'm doing all these things.
Yes.
What are some big ones that you hear?
Well, I think that it's too late.
Yeah.
That's probably the most concerning when I hear, and I'm always trying to like defray that concern. And I feel like I'm buoying people up a little bit, but it's not false hope. Like,
No.
the studies on, like, there's a couple I love to quote, like the Liftmore trial. This is a study of women who were, these are menopausal women who already were osteopenic and are doing this intervention that includes progressing up to some heavier lifting, and over an 8-month period, were able to gain bone density, 3% in their lumbar spine and a smaller amount in their hips. But so many of the interventions that are being studied are actually on people who might be those people who would otherwise think it's too late.
It's too late. It's too late. Everyone, I'm going to put the Liftmore study, because it's really fascinating, in the show notes. So a link, of course, along with a link for this wonderful, wonderful book. But so yeah, check that out. I'm glad that you referenced that. So that's a big one.
And
something I want.
And then
go ahead.
also,
Yeah.
I want to make another point that yes, everyone wants to follow their numbers. They want to see improvement in their DEXA score. But maybe you're not seeing improvement. Maybe it's even declining a little bit. But there's another aspect to bone health, which is not just your density. It's actually the quality of your bone and the microarchitecture of it. And so sometimes, even though that number isn't moving, you may still be reducing your risk by changing the quality of your bone through strength training, maybe some jumping. And I think that you're not going to see that on your DEXA scan. So it's, sometimes people are like, well, I'm doing this, and why am I doing this? This number isn't changing. There's a great long-term study that was done out of the Netherlands called the EFOPS trial, where people did some strength training and agility work, and they followed them for years and years. And early on, they did see some improvements, as you might expect from some of these interventions. Like there was some gain in bone density, but it kind of trailed off over time. But even though that change in their bone density trailed off over time, there was still a massive effect on reducing fracture risk in those people.
Right.
So I just think major misconceptions are it's too late to change anything. Not true. There are many interventions that will help you gain bone density. But also, if you're not seeing big changes, you may still be improving the quality of your bone. And then the other kind of aspect of misconceptions is that just these small changes aren't a big deal. But small changes, they really are a big deal. Like a 1 percentage point gain when you're talking about bone density, it sounds so tiny, but it's a big deal, big gain. So
it really, really is. And I just want to get back to that microarchitecture aspect of your bones for a second. There is that layer that can be added to your DEXA, which I get every year now, TBS. And I've been encouraging my audience for at least 5 years, at least, to ask for that. Not every facility offers TBS. I go to one.
To have the extra software.
It's the extra software. It's like a layer on top of your DEXA. It's not an additional test. It's done while you're getting the DEXA. It's covered by insurance in most cases, certainly is with me. So anyway, everyone, just a reminder, if you're, scheduling a DEXA, to get the TBS layer on top of it.
You may see some improvement in your trabecular bone score, but maybe not perhaps as much in your regular DEXA score. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And that is exactly what happened with me. So that was, I was happy I had it. It was very kind of encouraging, kind of kept me motivated too. So I want to flip over now to inflammation. I get obsessed with things, Dr. Wittstein, and inflammation's one of them. And the vagus nerve is another one. And I just had on a great expert, in fact, one of the world's experts on the vagus nerve last week. And we were talking about inflammation and how inflammation, as we know, is really almost the root cause of so many things, so many chronic conditions, including joint issues, or certainly rheumatoid arthritis, which is his big focus with his new implantable device that stimulates the vagus nerve that we talked about during the episode. But inflammation, to tame the flames of inflammation so that, or inflammaging, as we often call it, as you're getting older, is really so important. And I'm so happy that you focus on that in your book and in your practice. And you have a lot of recipes. They're anti-inflammatory or inflammation and will help to strengthen bones. So what are your thoughts on this? How do you view inflammation as it affects the bones and the joints?
Yeah, inflammation crosses over to so many subspecialties and so many aspects of orthopedics. In terms of your joints, it's actually kind of the common pathway for all different kinds of arthritis. Certainly rheumatoid arthritis is the greatest example. This is an autoimmune condition with very high levels of what we call inflammatory cytokines and inflammatory markers, like a SED rate and a CRP, things like that you've probably heard of. But if you actually look at knees with osteoarthritis, more of wear and tear arthritis,
I have
those
one.
knees also end stage arthritic knees, they also have not as high of levels, but also some of those markers are elevated.
Mm-hmm.
And the pathways that lead to cartilage destruction still involve these same inflammatory cytokines like interleukin 1 and 6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. And those are the pathways that lead to the breakdown of the cartilage. They're just not as extreme in osteoarthritis. They're also present in something called post-traumatic arthritis. So a teenager who tears their ACL has a big bump in these inflammatory markers in their knees, the same kinds that we see in rheumatoid arthritis. And years later, they have more arthritis than someone who never tore their ACL at a much younger age. So inflammation is at the heart of cartilage breakdown, regardless of what type of arthritis you have. Caveat, I always want to emphasize this. If you have rheumatoid arthritis, do not think that an anti-inflammatory diet is going to reverse or stop your rheumatoid arthritis. There are wonderful, amazing interventions that rheumatologists can provide to you that will stop your autoimmune condition. And unlike osteoarthritis, which you can't just stop, you can actually stop that autoimmune attack of your joints with these medications. So I always worry about people reading something like this book and thinking it's going to be a cure-all for rheumatoid arthritis. That's not what I'm intending to say.
No. Yeah. And it's interesting. Everyone, if you missed, and it was a two-parter because it was a very long conversation with Dr. Kevin Tracey. But if you missed it, because a big focus was on rheumatoid arthritis, because the implantable device, I'm pointing to my neck because that's where it goes into the neck, that just was FDA approved and just, it became available. And that addresses rheumatoid arthritis. And he even said the same thing you're saying, Dr. Wittstein, that, you can't think you could do this and do that lifestyle change and all of a sudden magically it will be fixed. That's not how it works. Yeah. You need some other interventions. Yeah.
Interestingly, though, a lot of studies of anti-inflammatory food components that can be put into supplements, a lot of them are done in people with rheumatoid arthritis because you can see measurable responses sometimes to inflammatory cytokines. There's studies looking at omega-3 fatty acid supplementation and reducing inflammation in people with rheumatoid arthritis, or there's a study of quercetin supplementation, for example, showing that benefit. And I take a lot of that information in my mind. I think that also can apply to other types of arthritis because, again, you're reducing inflammation.
Right.
But when you think about what is the effect of inflammation on bone it's a little bit less direct. Okay, there are these inflammatory cytokines that lead to the breakdown of cartilage and joints. But in the process of what breaks down bone, some of the same inflammatory markers and cytokines actually are part of the pathway that leads to bone destruction as well. And some of the anti-inflammatory components of your diet that may help reduce inflammation, help your joints, like short chain fatty acids from eating, a lot of variety of fruit and vegetables, and our gut flora will create short chain fatty acids. Those have been shown to reduce inflammatory markers and potentially reduce symptoms of inflamed joints. But that may also help with inhibiting the bone breakdown process. That's actually one of the theories behind that prune study I posted on.
Yes, no, the prune study is amazing. Another study, everyone, I'm going to be posting that you really should check out, the prune study that you talked about in that Instagram post. It's incredible, isn't it? Can you just talk to us about that?
So I'm not sure. I'm not trying to say prunes are going to cure your osteoporosis.
but there is good science behind the prunes, 4 to 6 a day, right?
I thought the study was well done. It was a study looking at where women who are menopausal with osteopenia were randomized to no prunes or eating 6 prunes a day. There was another study group that included 12 prunes a day, but it had high non-compliance, and I can imagine that would be hard.
Sure. That's like a little overkill on the prunes.
Yeah, it might cause some GI issues. But
yeah,
the 6 prune group, they like followed them for a year, and they gained a little bit, a little bit of bone density in their hip. And it's, so maybe like what is behind that? Is it the fiber content generating short chain fatty acids, which may then inhibit some of these inflammatory cytokine pathways that contribute to bone breakdown? Is it that there's some of the nutrients in prunes, some vitamin K, some boron, which are micronutrients that can contribute to bone health? I don't know the exact cause. And
no, I don't think they know the exact cause, but it's interesting.
There's probably other foods that could do this, but if you put someone on a regimen and they're like, every day you eat 6 prunes, that's fairly regimented. The study was funded by a prune association. So yes. You always have to look at everything with a grain of salt. But I think it was reasonably done. There was a control. They recognized the weaknesses. I love prunes for other reasons. I didn't have an issue with that.
Prunes are good. It's like how I feel about these things is, again, I'm not saying take it with a grain of salt because I think there's science behind it. So I think we can go a little bit more than that. But I feel that it's just adding to your toolkit, to use an overused term, toolkit of bone health. I mean, that's exercise, eat well, everything that you talk about in your great book. And prunes should be one of those things you add into your toolkit. That's how I feel about it. And, when you put it all together,
if you hate prunes and they give you GI distress, do not feel like you have to eat 6 prunes.
Exactly. Just maybe lift a little bit more weights or something. Whatever.
We'll get to a comment like, it would be easier to just go lift weights. I'm like, I'm not saying you can't eat prunes instead of lifting weights. That's something.
Exactly. It's not either or, everyone. It's not either or. But this is a good time to move to another question. It's like, your recipes, you like to say in your book that it covers really every style of eating, whether you're an omnivore or a carnivore or whether you're a vegan. Like you can really, you touch on all of those. So, because it's important for people to realize that if you don't eat dairy, maybe you can eat dairy. Maybe that gives you some gastric issues, but lactose intolerant. But it doesn't have to be dairy. I mean, we've just shown that. I mean, prunes are not dairy, and they probably help a little bit. So, talk to us about that. Some plant-based ideas.
Yeah. So, I think you can get a lot of calcium from non-dairy sources. If we're specifically talking about calcium, right? It's just you have to be, I think, more thoughtful about it, more careful about it. I'm not a vegan. I love Greek yogurt and skyr and, so I definitely get some calcium and protein and through those sources. But there's a little bit of I think myth busting always to be done about where you can get your calcium. And the biggest myth in the plant-based side of it is that spinach is a good source of calcium. Spinach is really good for other reasons. It has antioxidants and, other vitamins and minerals that are important. And it's not that it's an unhealthy food. It's just not something I would rely on for calcium because it has very low bioavailability of calcium. You're just not going to absorb a lot of the calcium. On the other hand, there are other plant-based sources of calcium that have high bioavailability and are a good source for you. The plant source with the highest bioavailability of calcium is bok choy, but also other cruciferous vegetables, which, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. I think one that people don't think about a lot is basil seeds, which hydrate. They're kind of like chia seeds. They hydrate a lot faster, and you can put them in almond milk, and much like you would, if you can't have dairy.
Right.
I like to put them in a Greek yogurt with fruit, and then you're getting the protein, the calcium from the yogurt, the calcium from the basil seeds. You're also getting some omega-3s. And then you get some fruit in there. I love that combination. But if you're someone who can't have dairy, you could put that in a soy-based yogurt or an almond milk. So that's sort of one I think people don't think about a lot. But yeah, there are ways to get calcium outside of dairy.
I just became aware of a new company. And in fact, I had the co-founder on the show a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Jennifer Hahn, and she's at Cornell. And
Scene.
Scene Nutrition. She's so delightful. I mean, she has quite a backstory with her own osteoporosis that was due to after having her baby. And so for all of you who already listened to that episode, you know what I'm talking about. And so, but it's a great idea that it's a food-based, right? Synthetic, anything.
They used almonds and mushroom.
And it is dairy, meaning because it is milk-based, but she explained to me on the show that even for people who are lactose intolerant, they can still take it because of it. All the lactose has been removed and just the protein that's important for calcium for bones is kept in. Brilliant. Brilliant. And again, two friends got together. They were two friends.
I talked to them about
friends.
That. Yeah. And
so you're aware of each other, or should I make the connection?
Yes. No, I meant and they include in there some mushroom-based vitamin D, I think, within it to combine that. But and they're thinking of prunes, they're thinking of mushrooms, so they'll be coming out with new things. I'm very intrigued by them, and it's like, yay. And I went to Cornell and studied nutrition and science there, so I connected with them on that. Yeah.
On that, okay, perfect. Perfect. So I just wanted to touch on the study that you did. You co-authored with Dr. Von der Wright, who's been on the show also, and it's called the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause. I mean, it really is a huge study.
Yeah, it's more of I would say, a review and kind of putting a name to something that has a lot of parts to it that menopausal women experience. So it's not a study in that paper doesn't study women and study with women with or without intervention or something like that. But Vonda and I sort of encapsulated or kind of wanted to summarize all the impacts on menopausal women that estradiol withdrawal basically has on your musculoskeletal system, which it
was incredibly helpful.
A lot of in practice.
Whatever word you want to use, your study, your research, a compilation, a review, it was incredibly helpful to put a name to what is happening to women's bodies that as they go through menopause. And we really do applaud both of you for doing this on our behalf.
We started working together on that because we're in an organization together called the Forum, which is women orthopedic surgeons specialized in sports medicine. And I'm the president of that group actually right now. And it's a wonderful organization of very thoughtful and maybe biased, I think just brilliant women. And we've had
I'm sure you're all brilliant.
Well,
no doubt.
Had a lot of good work come out of that group. And, Vonda and I worked together on that through that group. And we've done some.
And they got a lot of press.
Pieces. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really wonderful. And thank you for doing that. I want to talk about moving and exercise a little bit, the exercise section in your wonderful book, The Complete Bone and Joint Health Plan. Everyone, get this book. It'll be your roadmap to stronger joints and bones. For someone, I had to step away from marathon running because of this osteoarthritis in my knee, along with a little stress fracture I ended up getting because I did a rookie move I won't go into right now. I guess all of us do that at some point. It's like, what was I thinking? Okay. And so I'm still recovering, but I'm really very intrigued by your approach to moving. And a lot of your ideas are equipment free. And which is really great because a lot of people go, I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't want to buy equipment. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think as a starting point for sure. Well, first of all, there are many things that don't need equipment, like balance work, mobility work, agility
push-ups.
work, push-ups.
A plank.
You can do a lot with your body weight.
I can name a bunch of my favorites.
Yeah, you can do a lot with your body weight. You can do a lot with even resistance bands, but one of the most effective exercises you can do, especially for your hip bone density, is some jumping. And you don't need anything but a step or, basically nothing to do some jumping exercises. And then in the book, we kind of start with a lot of body weight things that you could also add more weight to. I have a lot of dumbbells at home, and you'll see in some of the images we do use some dumbbells, but the large muscle groups of your body, yeah, you can actually load with your body weight. It's not as intense as like heavier lifting, obviously.
Yeah.
You could do deadlifting with some light dumbbells. You can do step downs and step ups on a single leg. That's actually you're like lifting through a depth. You're lifting your entire body weight like through that leg using your quads and glutes.
Mm-hmm.
I think body weight based exercise is a very good way to like introduce people to strength training. You can add some dumbbells over time. I think a lot of people are starting from nowhere with strength training. And so you don't want to just all of a sudden go do super heavy lifting either.
Yeah, I agree. I think all experts would agree, as you're saying, agree with you that you have to build up.
Resistance to higher. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I do want to get back to the jumping. You do post on Instagram, as we refer to that quite often. Yeah. Everyone, you must start following Dr. Wittstein. They're very engaging, and you're going to want to do what she's saying. Trust me, because I do. But you have shown in a few Instagram posts, you jumping rope. So there are two questions I have. One is actually from someone on Instagram, because I posted that you were going to be a guest on my show. And I said, hey, what are your questions? So I'm going to read that in a second. But first, I want to ask you about me. So I mentioned I do have osteoarthritis. Is it based on how you feel? Like, I do want to jump a little bit more, but I'm a little afraid of it because of my osteoarthritis. Can you tell me what to do?
This is always a problem. And this is why I kind of, Sydney and I in this book, we wanted to together. I think you can't consider joint health separately from bone health, because some of the things we're like, it's so confusing. You're like, oh, I should jump and like slam into the ground really hard. But then I have knee arthritis, and my knee arthritis doctor is telling me like avoid high impact because that's bad for your knees. So
exactly.
How do you thread the needle? And I think, like I like to tell people, every individual is different. So arthritis can be mild to moderate, and you may tolerate doing 30 jumps 3 days a week, which is a good level of intervention for you for stimulating bone density. But if you're trying to do that and your knees are swelling, or like the next day, like because you did it, you're suffering for it, you're probably exacerbating the arthritis. This is the same thing I tell my patients who love pickleball.
Right.
If you play pickleball for 2 hours and the next day your knees are swelling, you're exceeding what your cartilage will tolerate, right? So then we need to find ways to modify, and it's okay if you need to modify. It's okay if you can't jump off of a big step, or you need to jump off of a smaller step, or you need to do heel drops instead of jumps because that's better than doing nothing. Some of my patients actually have less knee pain jumping on a small trampoline, like a rebounder, people call it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at, there's like one study on that, like specifically looking at bone density, it's hard to find. And, in that study, which I shared on Instagram, they did gain, the people who were using a rebounder versus not, they did gain a little bit of bone density in their hip. But if you compared them to the group that wasn't using it, they didn't show a statistical difference. So it's kind of like, was it really making a difference? Not sure, but it was probably, again, it's better than not doing.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
And studies of pool-based exercise. If you can't jump on land, you can do some pool jumping, like in a shallow end or somewhere where you can get at least some of your torso out of the body. You're generating resistance from the water by jumping. You're cushioning the impact some, so you're getting less of that stimulating effect, but you're also using your muscles. It's not as effective as land-based jumping, but in comparison to being sedentary, it is doing more for your bones. So
right.
You just have to meet yourself where you are. You can't be making your joints swell up and be limping for days after. That's not making you more, that's probably also a fall risk. So, you have to listen to your joints.
You're right. Your body gets a little bit out of, because I know that when that does happen to me, because I am running a little bit, not marathons, I'm running a little bit.
And I tell
kind
people
of walk run.
If honestly, sometimes running gives people such joy and identity. And if your knee swells a little bit and it goes down, it's manageable. That's different than your knee being the size of a grapefruit. And then it's kind of a matter of like, is the joy it's bringing you outweighing the discomfort, and these are decisions to be made. And maybe you can run less, but spread it out over several days or
yes, exactly right. Yeah, you just have to find your joy in some other way. And That's what I've been doing. But now I'd like to get to a question from Cindy on
Okay.
Instagram. Hi, Barbara. I recently discovered Dr. Wittstein myself. Okay.
Uh,
I am interested in knowing more about jumping, particularly what kind of surface we should jump on. I saw the cross ropes that she demonstrated and noticed they sell a jumping pad also. My
okay.
question is how jumping is affected. It's a great question. How jumping is affected by different surfaces and what is best. For example, if I jump in the house on a carpet, does that decrease the effectiveness? On the other hand, is it bad for joints to jump on concrete? Thanks for all you both
Yeah.
do.
This is that
Thank
back
you,
and forth.
Cindy.
Yeah, this is all the back and forth between like, what do your feet and knees tolerate, and
Yeah.
stimulating bone density. Yeah, so like a thicker shoe as compared to barefoot is going to diminish the load. Now, like a drop jump or a big squat jump with a rebound, those are going to create a ground reaction force that is definitely more than 3 times your body weight. So if you're cushioning it some, it's hard to know. Every surface is different, but like a little
Right.
cushioning is you're still probably going to still have like that impact. The mat actually for some jump ropes is actually just to protect your rope. So they're not thick or cushiony. It's just to protect the substance of the rope so it doesn't fray.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah,
So it
that's why-
really doesn't have anything
that's
to,
why
I'm
that
glad
mat
you
is-
clarified that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
okay.
did I actually learned from someone on Instagram, like someone who sent me a picture, like a jump rope. I'm calling it cordless, but it has like the weights on the strings, but it doesn't go all the way around, so you don't actually have to jump over it.
I was amazed by that. I mean, I personally had never seen anything like
Me
it.
neither. I didn't know they existed. And then I kind of looked into it, and there was like a local company, and it really does feel like you're jumping rope because you feel the weight of the rope and you can coordinate. And I got a lot of questions from people. So many people wrote to me and said, I used to love to jump rope when I was a kid and I want to jump rope, but they were like, I have forgotten how to jump rope.
How to do it. And also like it could be talk about fall risk. You could trip.
Well, and so
as you're
people
trying to
have
do
forgotten how to do that. Just
Yes.
like I kind of realized the other day, I almost forgot how to do monkey bars and I remembered, but or people who forget how to skip. It's because you don't do these movements. And so your body literally forgets. So I thought
So we all have to be kids again. I think that's another message for
But
today.
anyway, this sort of cordless jump rope, I actually think it's a great idea because you get a little grip strength in because you're gripping the handles and they have little weights on them. It's a little arm grip strength, shoulder work, and then you can feel it going down and you can simulate the motion. So I think you could actually practice it that way.
Yeah, that's great. So then in summary about this, so it really, just do the jumping, but the surface it matters a bit. And you even mentioned the shoes that are, because I wear Hoka's.
Yeah, I think each person needs to figure out how your feet feel, or, I mean, in an extreme version, yes, you would jump onto concrete with no shoes, but that's going to hurt some people's feet and aggravate their knees. I think you need to find
it doesn't sound like the best idea.
that you can do comfortably. Yeah.
So let's get over to lifting heavy, because I know that is something on people's minds because, your colleague, Dr. Vonda Wright, is actually a big proponent. She was talking about it when she was on the show here, and she's talking about it a great deal on social media and in her new book as well, about how lifting heavy should be the goal to really build up your muscles and your bones. Let's talk about that. What do you think?
Yeah. So if you look at studies of low intensity strength training versus intermediate versus high, certainly we see larger gains in bone density with the higher intensity lifting. And higher intensity we kind of define as, about 85% of your single rep max being the amount you're lifting. And this should, and then people are like, what is that? I don't even know what that means. I just tell people, think of the amount of weight where you could get through a set of 6 repetitions. And the 6th one is the last one you could do with good form. That would be high intensity. Most people don't really know what their single rep max is.
Right.
Versus something intermediate intensity would be something where you could get through 15 reps and the 15th rep is the last one you could do and still maintain good form.
Right.
So that's obviously going to be a lesser amount of weight. There are studies certainly that show both of them can benefit you in terms of increasing your muscle mass and strength and help increase your bone density. It's just the more intense, higher intensity lifting is going to do more. But I tell people you have to be realistic. Like I'm a physically fit, healthy 47-year-old woman. I cannot do high intensity overhead presses because when I do that with good form and I know what I'm doing, I routinely get a tendonitis. And so like for me, overhead pressing is never going to be in my group of things that I do with high intensity. It's just like I'm an orthopedic surgeon and this happens to me. So,
Yep.
so
It isn't for everyone, in other words. It
like
really
I choose
isn't.
to do that as a moderate intensity. There are other forms of lifting that I have done for years and built up, and I continue to like, your gains get smaller the stronger you get, but for me at least. And so like I do the higher intensity for deadlifting and squatting, and I love to lift really heavy with a hex bar, but there are people who are going to have like an arthritic hip or knee or, just other limitations. And I think that people, I always say this, I just think people need to give themselves some grace. And it's not like if if you can't lift super heavy, that other aspect of strength training is still worthy of your effort and is still helpful. So I don't want people to feel like if you can't lift really heavy, there's no point.
Yeah.
And you do need
it's
to
not
listen
all or
to yourself
nothing.
and again, back to the Lift More trial, these women were trained up in the first 3 months. It was like a lighter intensity, and then they built them up to the higher intensity. But everyone's high intensity is also different. So what does it mean if my 85% of my single rep max may be different than yours? But that's what you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, I am trying to lift a little heavier. I'm heading down that road. When I first started running, strength training really wasn't a thing to do.
Right.
It's so interesting how it's changed. It's been 18 years.
Yeah.
And because I started running at 50, but now in recent years, it's become a big priority of mine. But I would not say I'm lifting heavy the way Dr. Wright is defining it. I'm not doing quite that.
I think that would be great if everyone could do that. And I agree with that. But it's not everyone can, and that's okay. And also, so yeah, you want to get in some good strength training a few days a week, 2 or 3 days a week. The flip side of this is like, I also think then people I don't want to villainize cardiovascular exercise. Like we definitely need that. And I always remind people, for dementia prevention, you want to get 150 minutes of intermediate kind of exertion in a week. For your cardiovascular health, you need to do some zone 2. You need to do some endurance work.
Yeah.
You really should do, like I always say, like Monday nights, I always do my Norwegian 4x4 on something, either on my air bike or aerobic.
That's great.
You need to get in interval training for like literally keeping your heart young and maintaining your VO2 max. And so it's not, yes, strength training is very important and the cardio is too. And sometimes you can multitask. Like sometimes you're doing like some agility work and some jumping and you're getting some cardio in. So you can get 2 for 1 sometimes. So
yeah, absolutely. Of course. Definitely. I mean, I try to do that sometimes when I go to the gym, which is a new thing for me too. Like I was always like using my own body weight at home with the planks, the usual routine, planks and push-ups and whatnot, and wall squats and so on. But then running, right? But then since this happened to my knee, I've started to prioritize the strength training at a gym, I have to say, with some supervision.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then,
I felt I needed a little supervision.
If you have a joint that's like your sticky wicket, whatever is giving you trouble.
Yeah.
It is worth going to work with the physical therapist to find ways that you can work around that.
Yes.
There are alternative ways to strengthen, and some are going to be more aggravating to your problem, joint or joints than others. And so, a physical therapist can be an amazing resource in a different way than like maybe a trainer. would be, for instance.
Yep, exactly. I just wanted to now jump over before we close out to talk about, we referenced before having the toolkit, your vitamin D and your calcium, and then all the micronutrients that you talked about, and eating well, eating for your bones and your joints, and exercising in all these different ways, and all the ways that you point out. I'm going to hold it up again, the Complete Bone and Joint Health Plan by Dr. Wittstein. It's really a great book. But there are new things coming out. We even mentioned Scene Nutrition with the food-based chews, as she calls them. And then recently you posted about a new device that you wear around your hips. It's a vibration belt based on NASA technology called OsteoBoost. And I had heard about it too. And I was fascinated because I'm always looking for ways to stop, again, my goal, stop the bone loss, stop the bone loss. And so I had the CEO, Laura Yeases, on the show a couple of months ago, 6 months ago, talking about it. I was so fascinated. So now I am a daily user of OsteoBoost. And I'm looking forward to my next DEXA in a year-ish to see if there's any change one way or the other. But I do feel it's like something, if you can add something to your toolkit that is not hurting you, that like there's no downside to this.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested to see.
So talk to us about that. So you talked about it on your Instagram because people have been asking you about it.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I looked into it, I actually, somehow I missed it. I didn't know about OsteoBoost. And I had a few people send me messages and saying, can you talk about OsteoBoost? And I didn't know what it was. So I just wanted to educate myself on it because, like I said, I do learn from people who, there's so much interchange from people who like follow you or comment on Instagram. Like I have learned so much from the questions people have asked me. And I got a bunch of questions about that. So I'm like, I'm just going to go right to the source. And I was trying to find the article that had been published on it. And I saw that they had some NIH funding. Like I'm an NIH funded researcher. So I'm like, that's a big deal if you get some NIH funding.
And it's FDA approved.
Yeah. And so I got the study and I read it and I talked to their chief scientific officer. I just wanted to understand it a little better. And in the study, they did look at CT measures of bone density, which is a little different. They also looked at DEXA scans. The CT measure can be a little bit more sensitive sometimes, a little bit less impacted by body habitus and things like that than a DEXA. And then they did this other thing, which is called finite element analysis, where it's basically you make a three-dimensional model from the CT, and it's a simulated loading of a vertebra to measure its strength. And they looked at bone strength in a lot of ways and density in a couple of ways. Told them I really think they should look at the trabecular bone score. I think that would be a good thing.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And so they didn't show a significant change in the DEXA. They showed some improvements in the CT measurement of density. And then in their finite element analysis showed some bone strength improvements with wearing this vibration device, like it looks like a fanny pack. So I think, it doesn't seem like it's something that would hurt anyone. Those results are promising. It's FDA approved for osteopenia, but not osteoporosis. I'm very interested to see if there'll be more data coming out about it. I really hope they look at it with the trabecular bone score because I'm wondering if that's going to be impacted by it.
Yes.
And, you know, like whole body vibration plates that you can stand on have mixed results. You know, I shared about like a systematic review and meta-analysis of all the studies looking at that. And kind of like half of them didn't show any benefit, half of them showed some. So it's very mixed. And there's the issue with vibration or whole body vibration is there's so many variables, like what is the frequency and what is the magnitude of it and how long are you on the device and what position are you standing in? And is it a synchronous platform where both sides are vibrating at the same time? Or is it one where the sides kind of alternate? So it's just like a lot of different information when you look at those reviews.
Right.
And
what I found interesting, though, and intrigued me enough to want to buy it and wear it, to wear the belt, the OsteoBoost belt, is it specifically is vibrating your hips and your lumbar spine. See, that is really critical to me because if I fall and break my arm, which I actually did when I turned 50, and that's how I found out I had low bone density. Yeah. It's not going to kill me. It'll be very inconvenient, but all right, I'll live through it. My mother fell and broke her hip and she died 2.5 years later. She spiraled downward, never moved back home again. And that truly was the end of her life. And that happens over and over and over again. So something that's going to help specifically with the lumbar spine and the hips is very intriguing to me versus the plates. And I know there's a brand out there called OsteoStrong. They have stores or, brick and mortar places around the country. And you stand on those. But as the people at OsteoBoost explained to me and the CEO did on the show, is that, it's vibrating and it'll go up to your ankles. It can only go up so high, according to them. So it won't travel up your body to the important areas that I think should be focused on, the hips and the lumbar spine.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just my view. We don't know. Who knows, right? I'm very eager to see what the results are in about a year. And, of course, but then again, I'm also doing other things too, but not anything different. That's the thing. I'm doing the same things I've been doing for like a year. So I'll be very eager. And of course, I'll share it with everybody.
We need to see your trabecular bone score. Yeah. The whole body vibration plates, the setting that seems to maybe help the lumbar spine is high frequency. So that's 30 hertz, low magnitude. So 0.3 G, not like the larger vibrations, and then 20 minutes a day. But 20 minutes a day can be a lot to stand on a plate. I mean, some people are doing other things while they're doing it. And the nice thing about the OsteoBoost thing is that you can
just walk around. You can just walk around and do it. That's why I do. I stand up with my computer at the, a stand-up desk and just do what I'm doing. I've even walked my dog once with it. They think it's a fanny pack. Yeah. That's exactly what you said.
I know we're going along, but I want to mention what you just said about your wrist. I like to remind women especially, because one of the first peaks in the occurrence of wrist fractures, distal radius fractures, is in your 50s.
Yeah.
Or maybe even in like late 50s, early 60s. But that is a wrist fracture is a marker of increased risk for a hip fracture later on in life. And
very sadly, sad but true.
Yeah. So I tell women, that is a wake-up call. It's also a time to definitely, have your bone density checked. Don't wait until you're 65. I guess what I want to say is sometimes the silver lining of a wrist fracture is if you sustain a wrist fracture and you get a DEXA scan and you get a diagnosis earlier, that may impact your decision-making in terms of other interventions. Like or if someone informed you that estradiol therapy is protective against osteoporosis or will slow your bone loss or can help you gain a little bit of bone loss and reduce your risk of hip fractures by 30%, reduce your risk of a vertebral fracture by 40%. And you have that diagnosis when you're in your 50s, you may then say, like, if you have osteopenia in your 50s, you may decide to use estradiol for prevention.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, for 3 years that this show has been going on, I've been a proponent of HT, and I've had a lot of experts on the show talking about HT and all the wonderful things it can do, and especially as it relates to bone health. And a big regret of mine, a personal regret, is that I did not go on to HT. No one told me to. Don't forget, we're going back 18 years when this happened. And hormone therapy and menopause, they just weren't talked about. They just weren't talked about.
Yeah, there was a reduction in utilization of hormone therapy because of the women's health.
Also because of the study. Yes. And so my doctor never even suggested it. And it's a regret because maybe my bones wouldn't be where they are right now, but it's okay. I'm doing other things. We don't want regrets.
Yeah. And whenever we talk about the benefits of hormone therapy, I also just think it's important to know, like, there are some people that can't use hormone therapy for other reasons. Sure. And just like when we talk about your bone mass peaking at age 30, same thing. Like, I never want someone to hear that message that, the estradiol is so helpful in protecting your bones. It doesn't mean that, if you can't use that there aren't other things that can help you, obviously diet and exercise interventions and There are even, depending on the individual, sometimes different options like a selective estrogen receptor modulator for some people that may also help with bone density, having other side effects. But I think people to have on your team, an endocrinologist, your women's health doctor, a physical therapist, an orthopedist, if you're having joint issues, just try to be really, have a team to help you with all those aspects. So,
Yep. I definitely have such a team. It's good to have a team behind you, everyone. Oh, Dr. Wittstein, this was a great conversation, and we covered so much and very important information. Before I let you go, can you just maybe share your top 3 takeaways that you really want everyone to remember from today?
Yeah. So, number 1, it's never too late to start working on your bone density. And we talked about top ways to do that through an exercise aspect are including some jumping exercises and strength training. Number 2, for people who can use it, hormone therapy that includes estradiol is prophylactic against and helps stop progression to osteoporosis. Just not one of the more commonly known utilizations of that medication. And then I think, well, you said top 3, right?
Yeah. Go. You can do 2, you can do 10, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. I think
just move and eat well. That's what I say.
Like if you just think about yourself as a whole person. Yeah. Nothing is an easy fix. So like think about your diet, think about your movement, think about your exercise patterns, but don't be afraid of seeking actual medical help, which may ultimately, in some cases, include medications for osteoporosis, because sometimes there's a lot we can do to help ourselves, but there are times that those medications are actually needed to help you not break a hip as you get older. So don't be fearful of those medical interventions that, they may be part of your plan. You can still include these other aspects. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And as always, everyone, when we're talking about bone health, I always direct you to the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation website. You all know I've been connected to BHOF for over 10 years now. I manage our wonderful marathon teams and several very important marathons like the Sydney Marathon, New York City Marathon. And so I'm very proud of all of them. And before we sign off, everyone, I just want to remind you, there will be links in the show notes for a lot of things, including how to follow Dr. Wittstein and also information about this wonderful book, The Complete Bone and Joint Health Plan. It really has so much information and it gets right to the point, right to the point. Here's what you need to do. Here are the numbers. Here's what you need to do. Here's some recipes, easy peasy, and great photos of Dr. Wittstein. Great photos of her doing it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And I hope you'll come back.
For sure.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Age Better Podcast, please do a few things. First, share it with all your friends and family. Then subscribe to Age Better wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Finally, if you have ideas for topics you want me to cover in a future episode of Age Better, send an email to agebetterpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to me on social media. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.